Should we get started? I hardly feel the need to use this because it's a pretty small room. Okay, let's get started. I'm Edward. I'm the risk manager at Cambrial, and market risk manager, I should say. And as a market risk manager, I've spent a lot of time talking to investors, hedge fund managers, traders of various kinds about what they do, trying to understand the way they think about the markets that they work in, where they get their ideas from for profitable trades, and when they have taken a position, how they think about the risk on those positions. So I don't know a lot about the technology that has been discussed in all the other rooms here today, but I do know something about the way that hedge fund managers think, and hedge fund managers and bank traders are the most sophisticated users of conventional markets. So what I'd like to do today is go through some things. I want to look at interest rates, and I want to tell you what I think a notional hedge fund manager would make of these things as they stand today. I think so. Before we do that, a little bit of economics, just to sort of set the scene. Interest rates not invented by central banks. They actually arise fundamentally when individuals handle money. And it's just a function of human nature. We all prefer to the instant gratification of consumption now rather than deferred satisfaction later. And all interest is, it's called, in economics terms, it's the time value of money. But all it is really is that little extra that we need to get paid to get to put off our consumption for a period of time. If digital assets, cryptocurrencies, call them what you will, mature and become widely used, we should expect to see interest rates appear almost spontaneously. So I guess the message here is we need to plan for them. We need to plan for them now. There's a second reason why I'm interested in interest rates, and this is actually the slide that I think I'm going to have most difficulty explaining to you, at least in the time that I've got here, because it's quite a subtle thing. But in conventional markets, interest rates act as kind of like elastic, holding prices together. Prices may diverge for various reasons, supply, demand, different views of different participants, but interest rates are one of the things that sort of tends to pull them back in line because of this process called arbitrage trading, where if I think something is overvalued, I can buy it with borrowed money and sell the thing that I think is undervalued. No, the other way around. You don't know me. Okay. We should be, therefore, very interested, if interest rates are functioning in that way, they should be uniform and sensible across different markets, and they should be roughly stable over time, because human nature doesn't change that fast. So that's another thing I want to look out for as we go through this. Last pure economic slide. Gent on the left, name of Adam Smith. He wrote something called The Wealth of Nations, which is the foundational text for classical economics. There are a lot of big ideas in that book, but two in particular. The train going by. He talks about the benefits of specialization in economic production, economic efficiency. We get more done if we concentrate on one task. He also, specialization requires coordination. Centrally planned economies historically haven't worked very well. In Adam Smith's view, and this is a brilliant insight, he said that markets are the thing which coordinates economic activity. And markets do that through essentially the signaling of prices. I think it's just worth reflecting that what we're talking about here today, has been about making markets in crypto assets more efficient. And if you make markets more efficient, you can go up the chain and everyone is better off as a result. So actually, I think this is a good way to be spending our time. Okay. As I sort of thought about interest rates in crypto markets, it's how you picture them actually depends upon interest rates in conventional markets, sorry. How you picture them depends upon who you are. So, for example, if you're a central banker, you think you control interest rates. They are what you say you are, and if you decide to change them, they change. So you draw a picture like this. Economists have a different picture, and anyone who's done any kind of economics course, I must try and keep the economics down a bit, but this is important. Economists will draw a picture like this. Now, stop me if you want me to sort of explain this any further. But the idea is simply that the supply or demand is in the vertical axis, and the rate, since we're talking about interest rates here, is in the horizontal axis. As rates go up, the red line of lenders, more people are prepared to lend, but as they go up, fewer people are prepared to borrow at that rate, so you get this, you get a declining line for borrowers. And where they cross is where you would expect to actually find the interest rate. The final group, the traders, start off as economists, but then, this is an old thing, they sort of join the real world, and in their view, it's not that simple as the economists say, and that there are a group of equilibria. There's a different price for different things, and so the crossing line there would actually be one of those points there. So they draw these curves we call yield curves. So I've just been talking about conventional fiat world, but as I sort of looked at the various protocols and markets in crypto or digital assets, it became apparent to me that actually the same distinctions apply there as well. And you can say, for example, that Maker sort of has a view of interest rates which approximates to that of a central banker. We can debate that. We can debate them all. But that's the way I think it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick on a couple of these names, and we shall see what we see. Okay, first up is the sort of central banker view, because that's actually the simplest. Tether. Everyone seems to hate on Tether, and I thought that was a bit unfair because it's actually doing something very useful in acting as a proxy for conventional fiat money in crypto space. So I thought I'd better have a look more into that, and I came across this, and I actually stopped feeling sorry for them at all. For those of you who don't know, this is a balance sheet. It's a form of accounting presentation. There are three numbers that matter in there, and they're all in bold. The top one, total assets, is the cash that Tether is holding to balance its liabilities. And I know there's a lot of kind of debate about whether those assets really exist. Let's leave that on one side for now. According to them, anyway, they've got $2.3 billion of cash in the bank. Against that, they have issued liabilities. That's effectively issued Tether of $2.3 billion. I think this number's gone down recently, by the way. And the difference between assets and liabilities is labeled shareholder equity. You can think of that as retained profits. With my risk manager, investment manager hat on, I zero in on that asset number. I think, ooh, money should earn interest. Quick sum, Fed funds overnight rate. They may even be doing better than that. That means that on that pile of cash, they are earning every single day, Saturdays and Sundays included, $144,000, 332 as change. That's actually not a bad sum of money. And to put that in context, if Tether were a fund manager sending highly paid analysts all over the world doing sort of very boutique, very detailed research, they might be able to persuade institutional investors to pay 2%. Here, they're getting 2.25%. I don't know what the exact number is, but I do know that if US interest rates go up, as they appear to be, that number is going to climb. It could climb to 5%. And they're doing, as far as I can tell, absolutely nothing. Conclusion from all this, other than the fact that Tether's got a good business, and it's not surprising they've got competitors. Conclusion from all this, as an institutional investor, I wouldn't hold Tether. Oh, sorry, one little detail which I should have made very clear. The people that hold Tether don't see any of that money. If they held the US dollars, they would. No institutional investor worth their basis points is going to hold Tether almost on a matter of principle. So, and in the cryptocurrency world, they seem to get away with it because no one's really focusing on that kind of thing. So, got to take notice of interest rates. Now I'm going to go to the market equilibrium. My friend's Dharma. Now there's a whole lot of technical detail around this, but you will have heard from Sid and others, so I'm not going to go into that in much detail. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, as far as I'm concerned, this is just an interest rate market in the raw. There's a site called LoanScan. I can go here and I can see what's done. I can see how much has been borrowed, for how long, at what rate, and what the collateral is. Now, in conventional interest rate markets, collateral is very important. In order to trade efficiently, I need to keep what's called my cost of carry as low as possible. And by that I mean, if I borrow, I pay interest. That's negative carry. If I lend, I receive interest. That's positive carry. If I buy and lend, well, I get some and pay some away, and the net of that is my overall cost of carry. In order to support trades, I post collateral. And there's been a lot of talk about collateral already, so I'm not going to describe that in too much detail. I have to put it up in this Dharma thing. The problem is, from a trader's perspective, that, okay, I borrow, I'm happy to pay interest on that, that's cool. I put up collateral, I don't get interest. So I see the headline rate there of, I don't know, 13.04% for, you've got to be a bit careful with this because there are some sort of very low numbers. But say it costs me 13.04% to borrow Ethereum. I put up 0x as collateral. I don't receive any interest on that. But if I had been lending 0x as collateral, I can't even see it there, I might have got 10%. So it appears on the headline that I'm paying 13% interest. Actually, because I'm foregoing the opportunity to lend 0x because I have to post it as collateral, and I'm not getting anything on anything that's there as collateral, it's actually costing me close to 20%. That is not, in my view, a situation which an institutional investor would be able to operate in. Next, compound. Compound, to my way of thinking about things, does something very similar to Dharma, but instead of operating at the sort of individual transaction level, where you can actually see discrete borrowers and lenders, it operates a pool. And that's fantastic. It makes it very easy to use. I tried to use Compound just to see what would happen, and I was able to get it up and running within, I don't know, an hour or two, which for me is pretty good. Again, if I look there, I see that I get paid 15 basis points for lending Ether, and it costs me 6.2% to borrow. A spread of just over 6%, 600 basis points in the jargon. That's enormous, and most people looking at Compound, that's one of the things that they notice. It would compare with a spread, say, US dollars 3 months between banks of around 15 to 20 basis points. So the 0.2% there. Going back to the trader with their worrying about their cost of carry, it's very difficult for them to put on these kind of arbitrage trades that make the market efficient if they're paying that kind of spread. But actually, that's not the interesting point about Compound, because I sort of made that with Dharma already. It has a different way of allocating interest payments. So instead, whereas Dharma, I lend to you, you pay me interest, here there is a pool of borrowers who pay interest, and that interest is then spread amongst the pool of lenders. And the reason, that's not really a spread. What's really happening there is that the interest which the 233 Ethereum holders, which is approximately 14.47 a year, that's been spread amongst nearly 30 times as many potential lenders. So it's a different kind of market. Now, this is the third time. I mean, I believe in reusing things. This is the third time I've reused this chart. It's the classical economics sort of market equilibrium. I tried to do the same thing for Compound. And I came up with this. Even now I'm not sure that it's right. But the borrowing line is essentially the same there, because I would imagine that as the rates go up, the amount that people are preparing to borrow declines. It's the supply line that's weird. I mean, you can see that it goes just in the opposite direction. And the reason for this is that, assuming that the rate is held steady, if you start here with a low supply, which means the interest income is spread between a small number of lenders, they get a high rate. But as you go up there, there are more lenders coming into the market, and that sort of drags the line, the sort of curve along like that. It's actually a parabola. And if you go back, here, that 0.15 and 0.62, actually correspond to those two green crosses there. I think. I mean, I still haven't fully got my head around it, but what I am clear about is that it's not, and this way of rates adjusting doesn't lead to a market equilibrium in the same way that the nice classical economics view of the world. And I think that's a problem when it comes to ensuring that the rate in this market is efficient. Yeah, that's compound. Finally, yield curves. Maturity along the x-axis, so longer and longer borrowing periods or lending periods, and then the rates. This is the typical shape, but that's just the one I've drawn. This is the real thing. This is US Treasuries and notes, so bonds, basically. As of a couple of days ago, I think each one of those red dots corresponds to a currently outstanding US Treasury bond. I would make the point that this is really incredibly smooth. These are percentages on the vertical scale. Those numbers are really, really close together. And the reason that they're close together is that conventional interest rate markets are highly efficient. If there's any single bond which comes out of line, an interest rate trader will be onto it. So if the bond is more expensive than it should be, they will be selling that bond, and then they will be managing the risk by using the proceeds of selling that bond to buy another bond with the same interest rate characteristics. That may only make a tiny, tiny profit on a sort of one turn, but because the markets are so liquid, they can wind up the leverage 10, 15 times, and all of a sudden that tiny difference becomes actually a substantial amount of money. And that's the force which is driving these dots into line. No one is going to object. No one is saying, hey, but what about that? What about those outliers there? You see just around about below the 2-year mark, there's a dot there. That dot shouldn't be there. So what's going on? Actually, if you look at it, there are, with that same maturity of 15th of May 2020, there are actually 3 bonds. And that one that you can see sort of away from the line is this 8.75 coupon. And the reason why it's off the line is that, in effect, because it's paying a high coupon, the bond as a whole has a shorter duration than, has a shorter time to repay than the actual maturity, because quite a large chunk of it is coming back early as a coupon. And even though that's true, the difference is what, 10 basis points between that and the 0.1% between that and the 1.5%. It's compared to the numbers that we've been looking at for compound, these are really, really small amounts. It's funny that there's some stories I could tell about this, but it's not. The people who trade interest rates for a living are extraordinarily detail-orientated. They really, really care about the tiny numbers, and that's because they have to. Last slide. I'll get back to the crypto world. These are futures. So they're Bitcoin futures. So these are they're rates taken from Bitcoin futures. there is a technique called cash and carry arbitrage. There's a reference later if you want to look this up. But essentially, I can look at the price of a Bitcoin future which are visible on a number of exchanges. I've got Deribit, Bitfinex, and CME, which is the sort of fiat world exchange. And I can work out from that what it implies about the interest rate of Bitcoin, either in absolute terms or relative to the US dollar. Now, you can see here, this purple line corresponds to Deribit, which is a futures exchange based in the Netherlands. BitMEX is its competitor based in the Seychelles. Those 2 points are yields for the December and March futures, and you can see actually they are really pretty close. So something is keeping those two points, well, those 4 points together. Probably arbitrage. But the red blocks are CME, and that's the regular fiat world exchange, which does everything from wind, oil, gold, S&P, and Bitcoin. And you can see on this December time frame, their December future is way different from the two others. So that tells me that there's something preventing arbitrageurs from acting to normalize those rates. I'm not quite sure what, but there could be a number of things. So I've gone through a number of cases. We can come back to them in the questions afterwards. Just to sort of, just to close, I'm not, as I say, I'm not a technical guy. I can't make any recommendations about how to sort of improve the protocol, but I would like to suggest, based upon what I've seen from looking at these cases here, some principles which might help make these markets better. I mean, the first one, which was the Tether example, is that holders of cryptocurrencies should always earn interest or carry if they're holding the instrument. The second one is the sort of the compound case, which is don't make up rules which prevent the market from reaching equilibrium. And finally, this is sort of what I've inferred from the fact that CME is sort of out of line with the two crypto native exchanges, that's BitMEX and Deribit, is that linkages are important. It's important to be able to take assets from one market and use them in another, so that you can, so that there are relations, enforce the relations between these markets which should exist. I guess that decentralization is not fragmentation, is what I'm saying in simple terms. Good. So, I am going to let you guys say what you think. I can go back to any one of these. This one?
Yeah. So there, the 4 points, so you're seeing a negative interest rate, but then like slopes up. So does that mean that right now, in the long term, it's cheaper to get long-term exposure? Like there's it's an inverse rule for.
Yeah. So what this is saying is that you'd be better off if you think it's cheaper to, if you want to hold Bitcoin or you want long exposure to Bitcoin, it's cheaper to buy or less expensive to buy the March.
Yeah. So that means people in the midterm think shit's gonna hit the fan, but then have a long-term view that actually things will get a bit better. That's what that's expressing.
Yes. I think here what it's expressing is, I don't know, this is all actually really, really good stuff, and the question about what actually drives these futures prices. Maybe I should talk a little bit more about cash and carry. And I find this easier to do in... Oops, my trading was on. Yep, thank you. I find this easier to do thinking about talking in terms of conventional assets, because I'm just more familiar with that. Imagine there is a gold future, March next year. And that future, I will tell you, trades at a discount to the spot price. So it's cheaper to buy the gold future than it is to buy the gold. Why would that be? The reason is that, well, let's take the counterexample that it was very much the gold future was selling at a premium to the spot. What you would do is you would sell as many of those gold futures as you possibly could. You would buy the physical gold and you would sit on it. And because when it gets to March, that future must settle at the gold spot price, and you've got gold spot, those two things are going to have to converge, and you will make money. Absolutely dead certain. And that is a very good arbitrage profit you've got locked in there. Problem is that sitting on gold is not actually costless unless it's a small amount that you can wear around your neck. You have to put it in a bullion vault or something like that where it's safe. And there's a rental cost. And you would have to factor in, if you were to do that arbitrage trade, you would have to factor in the cost of that rental. And you would do that. And you may well find that it actually means that gold should have a price which 3 months out is less than the futures price because you've got to pay for this storage. And that's in fact what happens. Does that make sense?
We just on that, just wondering, is there like an expected custodial cost for that? I mean, is there a kind of standard rate?
I presume there is if you're in the business of storing gold. I could probably put you in touch with some people in Switzerland if you're interested. But you actually, in a sense, you don't need to know because as long as you know what the factors are, you can read it off the chart. That's one of the nice things about this.
So in the tether example, the person who actually receives the tether or the asset-backed stablecoin can also lend that one out and get interest on it. So people are collecting interest on both the fiat side and the crypto side. Like, how does that work out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what you're saying is, if I've got tether, I can lend it to you and you'll be prepared to pay me interest on it. If you're prepared to do that, I'm happy for that. But I guess why would you do that? Why would you not just...
I mean, you can trade the tether for Bitcoin, lend it out of Dharma, or put it into a MakerCDP. You can collect interest on that tether that you have, while tether is also collecting interest on the assets.
Yeah. Okay, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would probably, if I was to lend you tether, I would probably require interest, if only because you may well default on me. But that doesn't actually change the fact that tether are taking that interest and keeping it for themselves, when normally that would go to the the holders of the assets.
So is there some kind of a double interest thing happening here? Like something doesn't add up, or it seems like there's a limited, like if there's $100 US, you can collect interest on it twice, once in the real world and once in
It's the Fed funds rate.
Sorry?
Like, essentially, the Fed is printing 2.25% a day, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's not 0 sum.
sound. But also the value of Tether fluctuates slightly. Sometimes it's 95 cents, sometimes it's $1, $2. In the last 3 weeks, it's gone down to, I think, 92 cents or 85 cents on like the Kraken exchange. So it trades at a discount, which means that if you're thinking that you're getting if you're borrowing Tether with the goal of having a certain amount of US dollars that is pegged to, that could sort of backfire if the value of Tether goes down to 85 cents or 90 cents.
Yeah, that was off the market though, wasn't it? That was off the market. That was just, there was a huge development because everyone was moving in favor. That wasn't driven by interest rates.
Driven by people losing faith in Tether. So it's trading at a discount because it's sort of a discount to losing faith. I think Tether.
Yeah, you're right. I was sort of, because there's a whole lot of questions there about what's really going on, but I sort of put that on one side because I just wanted to focus on the interest rate side of things, which is seems a lot clearer to me.
It's not how Revolut works though. Like Revolut, they give like free trading, free stuff, and then just take your money and put it in the money market or something. Or they install on your stall and then give you free trading.
Revolut is in the car.
Yeah, like that's how they operate. Like they take your money and they're like, yeah, we'll give you like free FX, super cheap FX and whatever. But then your money just sits in their account and then they just lend it out.
No, you're right. But that trick is as old as banking. It's just a particularly
Just curious, going back to Compound, I'm not very familiar with how they work. So you're saying they're setting the interest rates? Are they the ones setting, or is it the market is trying to find an equilibrium and it's completely incapable of doing so?
Never mind. Compound, again, I don't want to, I'm on dangerous territory if I go too much into the detail there, but I believe that they have a kind of an interest rate setting formula which is a function of the imbalance between buyers and sellers. So from memory, it's 0.5%. So that's your kind of like your central bank bit right there. We're saying it's 5%. We're saying it's 5% plus 0.5 times the ratio of borrowers to lenders. So if you get a greater imbalance, that's right. If you get more lenders, that will tend to drive the rate down.
And the spread is supposed to take into account to protect against what?
Compound will take a small spread, which I think is intended for default protection purposes, but it's something like 0.1%. That big number between 6.2% and 0.15% is not really a spread at all. It's more that the borrowers are paying 6.5%, generating 14 ether, and then that 14 ether is just being spread equally between everyone who's put their money into the lending pool. So, rationally, economically, I might say, okay, so in effect, I'm only earning interest on 1/30th of the money that I put into that pool. Now, either people aren't really serious about earning interest, which is kind of my first point, or they can't get equity, because rationally what you would do there is to say, okay, I will, instead of saying 6.2%, I'll take 6.19% as long as you fill my entire, and that's how markets get to equilibrium. That doesn't happen with Compound.
It's cooling down, but I'm just playing with the idea of cooling here. Wasn't it the idea of creating liquidity in an otherwise thinly traded asset class? So by pulling all those orders together.
Sorry, the train. Do you want to?
Sure. Just like pulling all those lending or buying order is the idea not to consolidate, and otherwise something that's so thinly, there's so little activity that you couldn't create it in the first place.
You mean that by putting together the pool, they create liquidity because it's just. I think that's absolutely right. I think they're doing the markets a service, but it just needs to be fine-tuned. Yeah. No? David, come on.
Maybe just to your one question on your last slide.
Yeah, when my thing's sort of moving, I don't know what's happening.
Right, I think one of the assumptions or principles you were saying that you should be earning interest on your assets.
Yes.
Right. So I think I personally kind of agree. I think psychologically I feel that's the minority. The majority are probably looking at it as a store of value, as in gold. Right? So not everybody is probably expecting a return.
Yes, I think there's a lot of truth in that. It may also be a bit like when the housing market was going gangbusters, and people's houses were appreciating by 20% a year. No one really worried too much about the rental yield because that was insignificant in return. And I think we may still be coming off a period when people have sort of calibrated their expectations relative to the massive run-ups in price that we saw at the end of last year. But I think a period of flat returns may concentrate minds on this type of thing. Okay, well, if anyone wants to talk about any more, just come find me.